Hello everyone, today I'm going to share with you guys an unexpected event of my life that will surely shock you. But before moving towards the video, click the bell like and for more interesting and grassing real couple stories, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Meet me. This is Zach Gilbert. I'm based in Chicago. Currently, I'm working as a nutritionist in the food company. Let's backtrack the last year when everything was going perfect. My marriage life is going really good. We were having one son. He is now 4 years old. I remember my physical relationship with my wife is really so satisfied. We used to have a lot of romance. My wife was really very irresponsible and beautiful woman. She used to take care of us a lot. In simple words, my marriage was really smooth, but things started getting wrong when my wife joined job as a receptionist in a call center. To be honest, I was really not in favor of her job because I did not want my son to get affected by his mother's absence. But according to my wife, we needed to earn more in order to give our children a better future. I was doing part-time job as well and invested in a restaurant at the initial days of our marriage. My wife was normal just like before, like she used to do home chores and was really concerned for us. But one day something awful happened. I remember it was about 2 a.m. of the night when I was sleeping. I got my eyes opened in order to quench my thirst. Meanwhile, I caught a sight on my wife who was chatting with someone on her mobile phone. I had never seen her being so occupied in her mobile phone. Especially at late night, I literally patted on my wife's shoulder and asked her with gestures that what she was doing in her mobile phone. I remember as soon as she found me awake, she began to hide her phone. She was really very confused and then began to give me an explanation that she was watching a hair full remedy in YouTube while I did not take anything on my nerve and slept again. Coincidentally, my eyes again got open at about 4 a.m. of the night. I was shocked to see my wife again awaken. But this time I did not ask my wife nothing. The next morning when I woke up, my wife was usually wearing a lot of makeup. When I asked her, should I drop her to her workplace? She denied and said that she will go along with her coworker. I remember when I asked her about her coworker, she began to shout like if she was suspecting me and did not tell anything about her friend who was going to pick her. My wife's activities were getting strange day by day. I remember it was Saturday's night. Usually we used to enjoy a lot in our weekends, but this weekend was really strange. I remember I was in the kitchen and was baking pasta for my wife and our son. While my wife came in the kitchen in a hustle bottle, she panicked and said that one of her friends got a serious car accident. So she had to go to the hospital. Well, I asked my wife to go with me in order to see her friend in the hospital. But my wife said that I had to stay with our son. I remember she was wearing a lot of makeup that day. It seemed like she was going on date instead of hospital. Well, I ignored and began to play with our son. I remember my son was crying a lot for the chocolate, but I was not having chocolate that time. So I decided to take chocolate from my wife as she usually used to keep chocolate in her cupboard. Fortunately that day, her cupboard was unlocked. I remember usually her cupboard used to be locked. She was really so possessive about her cupboard while I opened her cupboard for chocolate. I shocked to see an expensive gift in the cupboard. Literally, I got shocked because obviously my wife's salary was not enough to buy such an expensive stuff. I remember I was continuously calling my wife, but that day she did not pick. She was really not irresponsible like this before. I was really worried about her as it was about 3 a.m. of the night. But my wife did not reach. I kept calling her but she did not respond me. The very next morning when it was about 9 a.m. in the morning, my wife reached house. I remember she seemed really tired while I was extremely furious on my wife for her irresponsible behavior. When I rudely asked my wife where she was last night, she said that she stayed at the hospital with her friend. I further asked her about the luxury gifts. After hearing from me about the luxurious gift in her cupboard, my wife was so confused and was like a fish out of water. I remember she started curling that I was checking her cupboard in her absence. After our great argument, my wife told me that one of her friend had these gifts. Well, it was beyond my understanding how an ordinary woman could afford such an expensive gift. Well, I ignored as usual. But the thing is, my wife's attitude towards me was really disappointing. Like she stopped making breakfast for me. She used to reach house very late whenever I used to ask her about the reason for her late arrival. Her answer was same. Every time that she was doing work, things were getting complicated and unbearable. Even our physical relationship was really bad. Whenever I used to be very high and asked my wife for being physical, she stopped responding me back. It seemed like she was totally full and did not want any anymore. Well, I decided to chase my wife because things were really complicated. The next day when I woke up, my wife was preparing herself for her office. As usual, she was wearing a lot of makeup. I remember her phone was continuously vibrating. It seemed like someone was desperately wanting for her. She hurriedly took her hand back and gone. But as soon as she went out of the house, I followed her. I kept following her and finally she reached dead at her office. I decided to go into her office. I was really very confused that whenever should I go inside her office or not. Well, when I went into her office, I came to know something really unexpected and unbelievable. I remember when I was asking about my wife from the receptionist, she was continuously judging me. Her face expressions were just so perplexing. After a while a maid came and gave me gestures like if she wanted to say me anything. When I asked her what she wanted to say me, she said something that was really a turning point of my life. She said that my wife was having a relationship with her boss. She further told me that almost every staff member had cached them together in an inappropriate state. I remember that maid was literally begging and requested me not to expose anything while I calmed her down and went out of my wife's office that time. Literally, I was totally crazy. To be honest, I was in a great anxiety. I really did not know what to do, but an idea popped up in my mind. That was going to be hell for my friend and her boss. My wife once told me that her boss was married. I decided to expose about my wife's relationship with her boss to that boss's wife. But I really did not know how to interact with boss's wife. I remember at night when my wife reached her house, she was so tired as usual, her makeup was ruined. She was trying to hide wounds on her arms and that was indeed love bite. She did not take any interest in our son. I remember our son was crying for his mom, but my wife did not pay any attention to him and declared that she was extremely tired. Her behavior was really unbearable at all. I was burning in the event and wanted to give her a lifetime lesson soon. But at the same time, I was worried about my son's future too because how a 5-year-old boy could live without her mom. And I was really very depressed that what if my wife compiled a case against me and would get our son's custody. I decided to admit my son to my school fellow's daycare because I remember she was really very caring and beautiful. The next morning when I woke up, I again decided to chase my wife in order to get the address of her boss because I wanted to tell everything to her boss's wife. And just like last day I followed her and finally reached her office. But unfortunately, when I was talking to the receptionist, my wife was shocked to see me at the office. I remember she was literally gazing at me and asked me about the reason for my presence at her office. I lied to her that I was here in order to apply for a job. As soon as she heard this, she did something really awkward. She literally pushed me slightly and said that it's against office policy to appoint members from the same family. She was requesting me to go. So I left. I really did not know how to get her boss's address as well. Finally, I caught sight of a poor driver. He seemed really greedy as he was continuously looking at me as if he was up for helping me in return for money. Well, I gave that person some money and asked me for the address. I remembered that person was really very greedy, as she demanded more money in return of boss's address. It literally took me 2 hours to reach at my wife's boss house. Finally, when I reached the house, the guard was not allowing me to enter in the house. Well, after my great insistence, I finally got to interact with the boss's wife. I remember she was really a simple and a quiet lady. She seemed like the one who loves to keep out of fashion. When she asked me the reason for my meeting with her, I was literally shocked for once because I couldn't believe that a rich and moneyed person would have a life like her. Well, I finally told her everything about my wife's relationship with her husband. I remember at first she was literally screaming at me and did not believe in my single word. She was literally asking me to get out of her house. But after a load of requests, she agreed with my idea of catching both of them red-handed. I took her number and said that I will let her know whenever I got any clue with their life partner's state. I remember when I went to daycare in order to take my baby, I literally burst into tears after telling my schoolfellow about my wife's infidelity. She calmed me down. I remember just one day my son started to like her a lot because of her soft and loving nature. Well, I really became so attentive and used to hear my voice phone call with her boss because I really wanted to know about their next date. One day I finally succeeded in knowing that my wife would date her boss in a hostel. As soon as I came to know about it, I quickly called my wife's boss and told her everything. We planned something amazing in order to catch them red-handed. When my wife left the house, I started following her. I got in touch with her boss's wife as well. They both were secretly and steadily following them. Finally, they both reached the romantic hotel. I remember the boss's wife was just weeping badly that time because she had never thought about her husband's cheating intentions. Well, we both kept following them and finally they entered the hotel room. My wife and her boss just began to take off their clothes and started kissing. Meanwhile, we both appeared in front of them. After finding us in front of them, they began to veil themselves. They were just like a fish out of water. I could feel the fear in my wife's and her boss's face. I remember the boss's wife literally yelled so loudly at her husband and slapped my wife harshly. She further said something that was really unbelievable. She said that she would take her property from her husband. I realized that she was actually the owner of the whole property. I remember after hearing this, my wife's boss manipulated and called my wife a slut. He further said that he was just using my wife physically. He had never developed anything about my wife. After hearing this call, my wife literally begged her boss not to leave her in this critical time alone. My wife was not even able to make eye contact with me. She was sweating badly and cried a lot. I remembered the boss's wife divorced her husband and made it crystal clear that she would not allow her to take any penny from her property. She further pointed me as a CEO of her company because of my loyalty and sincerity. My wife's boss was all out of money. So he fiercely pushed my wife by saying that he had ruined her career. I remember my wife was quiet and was in great shock at what had happened to her. But after about 5 minutes, she literally cried loudly and begged me for forgiveness. Well, I divorced her at the moment because I couldn't afford such a disloyal woman in my life. Her bosses also left her alone by calling her slut. After about 2 weeks of my divorce, I got married to my classmate who was running a daycare. Used to be her crush from school days. We are living a happy and a peaceful life. Moreover, she is taking care of my son a lot and my son became so fond of her loving and caring nature that he is calling her mama. Now my ex-wife is trying her best to fix everything. She wanted to have our patch up again. But obviously there is no way to live with her anymore. Case of our son's custody is going on these days. Please pray for us. What would you do if you got the same thumbs up if you like the video and share your feedback?